And then when I decided to start being a landscape architect in New York, it was in the middle of the 70s, where public space was considered a liability.
I can remember public space in the 70s.
And I would look at this furniture, and it looked like it was going to survive the next nuclear attack. And I just thought to myself, why would anybody want to be here?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I'm going to school, and they say, oh, you know, public space is great. And I keep looking at it, trying to find good examples. So that really colored a lot of my first years being a landscape architect. And I think that's probably why I got so committed to New York, was just, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way to think about public space, the human condition. Can't we design for a more aspirational view of our instincts as people, and not just assume that we have to defend against the worst aspects of people's lives? So that was, I guess, where I started. The other sort of important reality of my life is that I was a single mother. And so the idea that I would work abroad or I'd work elsewhere in the country was just not a possibility.
Right.
And plus I was teaching a lot to just pay the rent. So I kind of anchored myself in New York. Well, one thing that I was thinking about is that in my early years, I had the opportunity to work with some people who had worked in the Lindsay administration and had a lot to do with thinking about rezoning and how the city could be a better place. And I realized that experience made me recognize that this current administration was of a caliber that matched really what the Lindsay administration had tried to do, and that if I could kind of marry policy and advocacy with design, it sort of tied back to, you know, what I had experienced when I was younger. Even though I was kind of too dumb to realize what was going on, it has come to me since that was a remarkable period in time, and I think this has been a remarkable period for our professions.
Oh yeah.
You know, so Michael grew up in this beautiful place in upstate New York and surrounded by nature. I grew up, you know, in a very urban area with parents who are advocates for many things. I started out with a political science degree. It's not illogical that I would want to think about the policy aspects of what our profession can do and how it can, you know, potentially, I mean, I think we're all extremely cautious about overly controlling design, overly restrictive or proscriptive zoning and all of that, because I always say to my class, can you really mandate good design? And so I don't want to cross that line. But on the other hand, I do think that sometimes there has to be some level of top-down policy or thinking that encourages the broader world, and I don't mean just landscape architects or designers, but the people that think about and kind of consume the urban world need to be pushed a little. I mean, to get onto another subject we can talk about later, you know, what do I do on the design commission? Well, one of the things I do on the design commission is try to push people to do better design. Now, I find it a little odd that sometimes, here we are in 2013, I still have to encourage certain people to think about the environmental aspects of a project. I mean, that's really sad. And the very tricky thing about, of course, being speaking when I do on the design commission is that technically our purview by charter is just aesthetics. But how do you draw the line between aesthetics and
everything?
Right. So I do find that at least I've crossed the line a fair amount, and am advised behind the scenes if I've crossed too far on land use or program or site selection, none of which is technically in our jurisdiction. But it's come very much into my mind, you know, to what extent can I really request a project rethink the way they've formulated an attitude about the environment. You know, does that cross the line? Maybe yes, maybe no. But I've never been challenged by the
Mm-hmm.
behind the scenes on that particular aspect, but I do enjoy it. I feel that maybe it's time for a change when this administration leaves.
Well, I don't know how you do it.
It takes some time.
Holy moly.
But it has been good. And I will say, just for Michael's benefit, that even though he dreads coming, we really love it when you come, because
I send all those nice young men to
all
you.
those cute guys come. No, but I have to. I mean, there are times when I have to educate my fellow commissioners, and that they can see why it is that I speak as strongly as I do when a good project comes in that is well conceived, that has embedded in it all kinds of components that should be part of every landscape. I can sort of set you up and say, this is the benchmark we're striving for here. And it's good because if I remember when I first started teaching, I never took photographs of ugly things. But how do I teach my students to have judgment?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't show the bad and the good, even though of course it's through my own lens, and that's why for me it's really great to have an excellent landscape architect with a diversity of project types come in, and I can use that to educate my fellow commissioners, which is, I think I've succeeded a little.
I want to talk about Signe's work on the West Side Highway and Segment 3, because between her role in basically orchestrating you orchestrated the planting of the whole thing, right?
And the master plan of the park.
And the master plan of the park, and have executed one or two segments?
One
segment. I mean,
Hudson River Park.
Hudson River Park, but I mean, do you guys know how much real estate that is that we're talking about here? It's like a major thing. Yeah, I live in Brooklyn now, but for almost 10 years I lived in the Village and watched the execution of the transmogrification of the West Side Highway, which is a project that you both master planned, but also planted miles and miles of shade trees that over the course of the last 10 or 12 years has turned, I mean, I don't know if it's fair to say somehow blighted falls short of describing what the West Side was like. It's sort of somewhat inadequate as a word, but it was, it just wasn't anything like it is today. You've changed it beyond recognition. And then your beautiful Segment 3, which now that I live in Brooklyn, I mostly experience as an extension of the West Side Highway, but I love the reading of your segment along the side of the highway. It's kind of like an abstraction of a agricultural landscape, but it feels totally urban at the same time. It's a cedar and grass landscape, and it's very brief, but it's beautiful. And I love to, I mean, that must be something you're incredibly proud of as a New Yorker, and I'd love to hear any stories about it.
Well, it is interesting. One of the great things, just going back to the master plan for a minute, is that it was done at the same time as the highway was being planned. And so one of the things, and this is, I'm sure that you can have a similar feeling, but one of the things I spent 3 years doing was preventing the federal government from putting a breakdown lane on the west side, because they were going to use the parking lane on the east side as the breakdown lane, but then they wanted another 11 feet, the entire 5.5 miles. And I said that would have taken something like 35 acres out of the park over the entire length. And I said, that seems unreasonable to me. And I looked at the FDR and I said, the FDR only has a breakdown lane every 1,000 feet. Can't we just do that? So it seems really small and nobody would notice now.
And you certainly would never get an ASLA National Design Award for it.
I wouldn't. But we invented the mountable curb in that project, and we saved and 35 acres of parkland. When I drive that road, I would say that I really do feel like I did something there.
You should.
That does make me proud.